Warren reached the entrance. He looked at Ryder, and a smile broke across his face. The specific smile of a man encountering a memory he values. He grabbed Ryder's hand with both of his. 5 years, he said. Where have you been? Ryder said, selling coffee. Warren stared at him for one full second. Then he laughed, genuine, loud, the laugh of a man who has heard something that delights him in a room full of things that don't. You haven't changed, Warren said, and walked him into the room. The room went completely still. Priya's glass lowered slowly. Voss stopped mid-sentence. Colt said, "What is happening right now?" at a volume that was slightly too loud. Brennan Cho's eyes narrowed with the particular calculation of someone who is rapidly revising a set of assumptions. Sutton executives exchanged glances that communicated shared uncertainty. Douglas Voss went rigid. Warren Holloway brought Ryder to the chair at the center of the main table, the chair that had been conspicuously empty since the evening began, the chair that everyone had noticed without knowing why it mattered, the chair that had been waiting for someone specific and had now found that person. Voss could not hold himself back. He pushed through the crowd and walked up, the confidence of moments ago now slightly compressed, slightly anxious at its edges. Warren, what is this? This man crashed the event. He wasn't even invited. He runs a coffee cart on Mercer Street. Do you know who he actually is? Warren looked at Voss slowly, with the complete absence of urgency of a man who has never once in his life felt the need to hurry his answer. I know exactly who he is, Harlan, Warren said. The question is, do you? A pause. He's a nobody. Sit down. Voss's mouth closed. He stood there for a moment, recalibrating, then took one step back. Warren turned to the room. Quiet settled without his asking for it. The specific quiet of 200 people who understand they are about to hear something important. 3 years ago, Warren said, when the Holloway Group's Singapore acquisition was 18 hours from complete collapse, one person stepped in. Quietly. No press conference, no credit, no announcement of any kind. He restructured the financing in 48 hours and saved a $2 billion deal. He looked at Ryder. You want to tell them, or should I? Ryder stood. He looked at the room, at every face, letting each one register. Brennan Cho, the Sutton executives, Douglas Voss, Harlan Voss, Priya standing perfectly still, her expression doing something complicated that she wasn't quite managing to control. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a ring, gold with a small crest engraved on the band. The people in that room, who had been in certain rooms before, went still when they saw it. Brennan Cho said under his breath, barely audible, "That's the Rathmore seal." Ryder put the ring on. "My name is Ryder Rathmore," he said, "chairman of Rathmore Capital." Nobody moved. The information traveled through the room like current through water, invisible but felt everywhere simultaneously. Voss's color drained. Colt's jaw dropped and stayed there. Priya closed her eyes. The Sutton executives looked at each other with the specific expression of people rapidly recalculating every interaction they have had with a particular person and arriving at conclusions that are profoundly uncomfortable. I chose a different life for a while, Ryder said. His voice had the particular quality it had always had, unhurried, level, never performing. I wanted to see how the world treats a man when he has nothing, when his name means nothing, when he's just a guy with a card on a corner. He paused, let it rest in the silence for a moment. Now I know. The lower his voice stayed, the heavier it landed. That was the thing about it. He never raised it, and every single person in that room leaned in slightly, as if pulled. Some of you had my cart destroyed. Some of you threatened the people who depend on me for a cup of coffee in the morning. Some of you signed my divorce papers in the same week you were actively pitching me for a deal you didn't know was mine. He looked at Harlan Voss directly. The 3 projects you and your father are here to pitch tonight, every single one of them, I am the silent lead investor. I have been since the beginning. Douglas Voss put his hand on the back of a chair to steady himself. Harlan stood completely still for a long moment, then spoke, and his voice had lost every trace of the certainty it had carried on Priya's couch 2 days ago. "Ryder, I didn't know. I swear I didn't." Ryder looked at him with something that wasn't anger and wasn't contempt. Something more tired and more certain than either of those things. "You knew I was a person," he said. "That should have been enough." Jade stepped forward from the edge of the room where she had been standing, tablet in hand, composed and ready. Ryder said quietly, "Effective tonight, Rathmore Capital is calling in stake. Voss Group has 72 hours to restructure, or we dissolve the partnership and reissue." Harlan's knees buckled slightly, barely visible but visible. He started to speak. Ryder had already moved. He walked toward Priya. The crowd parted without thinking about it, the way crowds part for something that has its own gravity. She hadn't moved from where she had been standing since Warren walked him in. When he stopped in front of her, she looked up, and her eyes were wet, and her hands were shaking slightly at her sides. Ryder's voice was not angry. It was not triumphant. It was something else entirely, something that carried a weight that anger and triumph both lack, because it was simply true in a way that neither of those things are. "Priya," he said, "I need to tell you something." He paused. "The Oberfeld Group's last 4 contracts, the ones that kept your company alive when it shouldn't have survived, I funded them through a shell company. I didn't want you to fail. I wanted you to be okay, even when you didn't know I was there." Something in Priya's face crumpled, not dramatically, but in the specific way that happens when a person understands something important and wishes they had understood it earlier. "You were successful," Ryder said, "because I loved you, not because you didn't need me. You just didn't know what form I was in." He reached into his jacket and produced the divorce papers. Already signed, already done, the ink from 2 days ago. He held them for a moment. "This is final," he said. "I'm not fighting it. I never was." He set the papers on the table beside her. "But I need you to know, the life you built on what you thought was your own strength, part of it was mine. And I gave it to you because I wanted to, not to hold over you, not for this moment." His voice caught once for exactly 1 second. "Just because I loved you." The room was so quiet you could hear the chandeliers in the draft of the building's ventilation system. Colt looked at the floor. Priya's mother, who had slipped in quietly at some point and was standing near the back, pressed a hand over her mouth. Bree, somewhere in the crowd, had nothing left to say. Priya reached for Ryder's arm. He stepped back, not cruel, not with any particular drama, just final. The step of a man who has made a decision that is complete and is not going to reopen it, not because he is cold, but because he is done. "I hope you build something real," he said. "I genuinely do." Then he turned and walked back to where Jade was standing. In front of everyone in that room, he took her hand. "When my own life was falling apart," he said, loud enough for the room to hear him clearly, "Jade kept everything running. She kept me running. She never asked for credit. She never asked for anything." He looked at her. Jade was crying, not embarrassed by it, not trying to stop it, just letting it happen. "That ends tonight," Warren Holloway announced shortly after, the formation of the Rathmore Community Trust. $500 million allocated for street vendors, hourly workers, and small business owners who had been displaced by corporate land acquisition across the city. The room applauded. Ryder sat in the center chair and received the applause without performing anything about it, without the manufactured modesty or the expansive gratitude or any of the social theater that usually accompanies these moments. He simply sat and let it be what it was. Priya stood in the corner alone. The applause rang around her. She understood now, all of it. The quiet mornings she had interpreted as failure, the small rented room she had offered as evidence of his inadequacy, the cart on the corner she had used as proof that they didn't match, that she had outgrown him, that he was a weight she was carrying rather than a foundation she was standing on. She had mistaken patience for weakness. She had mistaken stillness for defeat. She had mistaken love for dependency. And by the time she understood the difference between all those things, the door was already closed. Ryder and Jade left together. Douglas Voss opened the car door for them as they reached the vehicle. Nobody asked him to, he simply did it. The instinctive deference of a man who now fully understood the geography of power in the room he had just left. The car pulled into the Chicago night. Ryder didn't look back. The story came out in the weeks that followed, the way these things come out in cities, piece by piece, each piece carrying its own particular weight. The revelation that the Oberfeld group had been quietly sustained for years by the man Priya had dismissed as a failure ended her professional career before she could exit it gracefully. She eventually left the city. Harlan Voss spent the 72 hours restructuring, frantically, with people working through the night, and Rathmore Capital accepted the restructured terms, not generously, but fairly, which was the most Ryder had ever offered anyone and the most he intended to offer now. The corner of Mercer and 9th was designated in the Rathmore Community Trust's first round of protected vendor zones. Nobody from Voss Group came near it again. Jade became Ryder's partner in every sense of the word.
Rathmore Capital doubled its valuation inside a year, not because Ryder had changed how he worked, but because he had stopped pretending to be something other than what he was. And the world, it turned out, responded to that in ways that surprised almost everyone except him. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, on mornings when he needed to remember something important, Ryder would go back to the corner of Mercer and 9th. He'd get there early, before the city was fully awake, when the cold was still complete and the light was still gray and the day hadn't yet become what it was going to be. He'd set up a small thermos, pour a cup, and wait. Gerald always came. The same spot, the same time, the same newspaper tucked under his arm. He never asked about the suit or the news or any of it.
He simply wrapped both hands around the cup, closed his eyes the way he always closed his eyes for the first sip, and said, every single time, without variation, "Still tastes like medicine, son." And Ryder would smile. Not the smile of a man who won, not the smile of a man who proved a point or took a victory or demonstrated something. The smile of a man who knew exactly who he was when he had nothing, and who had never, not for a single morning on that corner, not through a single cup poured in the February cold, lost track of that knowledge. Because the most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest one, or the most expensively dressed one, or the one with the most visible power. It is the one who already knows how the story ends, who has always known, who was simply waiting, in the cold, for the right morning to show everyone else. Here is what this story is actually about, underneath all of it. It's about the difference between what a person appears to be and what they are. Between the performance of power and its actual weight. Between the assumptions we make about people based on what they're wearing, or where they're standing, or what they seem to be doing, and the reality that those assumptions reveal nothing about the person we're looking at and everything about us. Priya looked at a man who chose to stand on a corner in the cold and make coffee for people who needed it, and she saw failure. She saw someone beneath her. She saw a weight to be put down. She never once asked why someone with quiet eyes and steady hands, and the particular patience of a person who has made peace with something important, might choose to spend his mornings that way. She never asked the question because she thought she already had the answer. She didn't. The most important decisions in this story weren't made in that gala, in that suit, in front of 200 people. They were made at 6:47 in the morning, in February, in the cold, when a man added cardamom to an old man's coffee because the wind was from the east and he knew the old man's knees. That was the decision that mattered. The rest was simply the world catching up to who he had always been. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, looked past by someone who thought they already knew what you were, drop it in the comments. Tell me what part landed. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, send it to them right now. Subscribe, because there are more stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next one. You're a coffee vendor. I'm a writer. We don't match. We never did. I've been carrying this relationship for years, and I'm done carrying it. Sign the papers right now and get out of my life forever. She said it standing in her own apartment,
her best friend beside her holding the divorce papers like a weapon, and a man named Harlan Voss sitting on her couch with his legs crossed and his expensive watch catching the light, and that particular smile on his face. The smile of a man who has already decided he's won before the game is officially over. What none of them knew, what not a single person in that room understood in that moment, was that the quiet man in the worn jacket standing at the table, reading the divorce papers page by page without rushing, was the most powerful person in that apartment, possibly in that entire city. And that within 48 hours, every single one of them would be standing in the wreckage of what they had assumed, trying to understand how they had been so completely, so catastrophically wrong. This is the story of a man who chose to be nobody. And what happened when he decided to stop? Chicago in February doesn't ask your permission. The cold comes regardless, through the gaps in your jacket, through the walls of buildings that weren't built with this particular wind in mind, through the particular bleakness of pre-dawn streets where the only light is the orange glow of street lamps on wet pavement. Most of the city was still asleep at 6:47 in the morning when a 26-year-old man named Ryder set up his coffee cart on the corner of Mercer and Ninth. He moved with the unhurried precision of someone who has done this so many times that it has become meditation. Stacking paper cups, filling the thermos, wiping down the counter. Each movement slow and deliberate, like every action had weight, and he respected that weight. An older man named Gerald shuffled over first, the way he always did. Newspaper folded under his arm, taking up the same spot he had taken up every morning for as long as either of them could remember. Gerald wrapped both hands around the cup the way people wrap their hands around warmth, when warmth is the thing they most need. He took one sip and looked up. "Ryder, you put something different in this today." Ryder didn't look up from what he was doing. "Little cardamom. Wind's picking up from the east. Figured your knees would need it." Gerald closed his eyes and took a second, slower sip. When he opened them, he looked at the young man behind the cart with an expression that had more in it than gratitude. "Boy," he said quietly, "you don't make coffee, you make medicine." A cab driver named Dion leaned against the cart a few minutes later, his eyes half closed from a double overnight shift. The specific exhaustion of a body that has been running on will and black coffee for 16 hours. "Man, I don't know what you put in this," Dion said, "but I swear my body stops fighting me after the first cup." Ryder smiled, the small, private smile of someone who doesn't need the compliment to know the work is good. "It doesn't fix anything," he said, "just makes you forget for a minute." That was his life. Quiet, contained, purposeful in a way that nobody around him fully understood. He knew things about Gerald's knees. He knew things about Dion's schedule. He knew the little girl who came by on her way to school and always wanted hot chocolate, and he always had it ready before she asked. He understood something about the particular transaction happening at his cart every morning that had nothing to do with coffee and everything to do with the specific loneliness of people who live in cities and move through them every day without being truly seen by anyone. Then a black SUV pulled up. 3 men got out, wearing the kind of expensive jackets and clean shoes that communicate not earned confidence, but borrowed confidence, the type that comes from proximity to someone more powerful. The one in front raised his voice to make sure the entire block heard him. "Everybody clear out. This corner belongs to Mr. Harlan Voss. Parking expansion starts today." Gerald stepped back. Dion set his cup down. The small, early morning crowd dissolved without a word, the way people who understand how power works in a city learn to dissolve when a certain kind of energy enters a space. Ryder didn't move. He kept pouring, kept stirring, as if the 3 men were weather, something to be noted and then ignored. The man in front walked up close, looked Ryder over with the particular attention of someone identifying what can be discarded. "You hear me? Pack up. This is Voss territory." Ryder looked at him. No panic in those eyes. No anger. Just the steady, unhurried gaze of a man who has already seen worse things than this. "This corner belongs to the city," he said. "Not one man." The man almost laughed. You know who Harlan Voss is? I've heard the name, Ryder said. Don't need to know more than that. The man's jaw tightened. He shoved the cart sideways, hard enough that 2 cups fell and cracked against the pavement. Then he pointed at Ryder like a warning, climbed back into the SUV, and left. Gerald came rushing over the moment the vehicle was gone. Ryder, those are Voss people. Don't do this. Ryder crouched down and picked up the broken pieces, one at a time, unhurried.
Gerald, he said without looking up. A man who wakes up in the morning specifically to take something from somebody with nothing? I'm not afraid of him. That evening, a different car arrived. Bigger, quieter. The man who stepped out didn't need volume to command a space. He was the kind of person who communicated authority through the specific economy of his movements. His name was Mick, Harlan Voss's operations director, the kind of man whose entire professional purpose was to solve problems before they became headlines. You the one who talked back to my guys this morning? Ryder turned around completely calm. I asked for what was mine. If that's talking back, sure. Mick stepped closer. You know what Voss Group is? I do. Then you know your little cart won't be here tomorrow. Ryder started packing up his things, no hurry in any movement. Then, without looking at Mick, he said, Can I ask you something? Mick stopped. How do you know my name?
Ryder looked at him then. Steady, almost bored. The way you look at something that doesn't quite surprise you. Same way I know about the Section 9 land filing from 3 years ago. The one with the missing signatures. The air between them changed immediately. Something moved through Mick's face. Not rage, not the bluster that had been there a moment before, but something quieter and more fundamental. Something that looked very much like fear. What are you talking about? Just reminding you, Ryder said simply. The cart stays. He picked up his thermos and walked. That night, Ryder sat in a rented room that had seen better decades. One bed, one table, a photograph of his mother on the wall, and on the table, a laptop that looked spectacularly out of place in that room. Sleek, expensive, the kind of machine that belonged in a boardroom or a corner office, not in a rented room with a water-stained ceiling and a radiator that knocked twice every hour. On the screen, files, financial records, corporate structures, names that meant something in this city. Harlan Voss, Brennan Cho, Sutton Park Group. Each one mapped, annotated, cross-referenced with the specific thoroughness of someone who has been building a picture for a very long time. His phone buzzed. A woman's voice, careful and close. Jade, you okay? Heard the Voss guys came through. I'm fine. A pause. The Holloway Group party is in 2 days. Brennan Cho, the Sutton people, Voss, they're all confirmed. She said the next part more quietly. And Priya, her and her brother Colt, both on the list. Ryder was quiet for a moment. He looked at his mother's photograph on the wall. Jade, handle the Voss situation quietly. No moves yet. Yes, but Ryder, tomorrow. He put the phone down. He didn't sleep for a long time. Priya, his wife, daughter of the Oberfeld family, sharp, driven, beautiful in the way storms are beautiful when you're watching from somewhere protected. He had loved her genuinely, the uncalculated kind of love that doesn't run cost-benefit analyses. She had married him for reasons that were more complicated than love, at least at the beginning. Her grandfather had wanted the connection, had seen something in Ryder that Priya herself had not looked closely enough to see. For a while, the marriage had worked in its own imperfect way. But as her career accelerated and his apparent circumstances contracted, the distance between them had grown. Slowly, the way distances grow when neither person names them, until it became a wall, and then a permanent architecture, and then simply the shape of what they were. She had stopped seeing him. She had started seeing what she thought he was. And those two things turned out to be very different. The next morning, Priya called before he was out of bed. Her voice had the temperature of a fire exit door, functional, cold, designed for emergencies. Ryder, come by the apartment today. There's something we need to handle. When he arrived, her best friend Bree was already there, sitting straight, papers organized in hand, positioned like a co-counsel preparing for a deposition. Ryder had barely stepped through the door before Bree was on her feet, thrusting the papers toward him. He took them, looked. Divorce papers. The room went very quiet. He set the papers on the table, looked at Priya. "Is this yours?" Priya glanced at Bree for half a second before answering. "Yes, it's mine, Ryder. This isn't working. I've been carrying this relationship and I'm done." "Was that you talking, or her?" He nodded toward Bree without taking his eyes off Priya. Bree stepped forward immediately, her voice carrying the confident certainty of someone who has been rehearsing this. "She's speaking for herself, and honestly, you've given her nothing. She's built everything she has with her own hands. You sell coffee on a street corner. She deserves more." Ryder looked at Bree.
Not angry, something more unsettling than anger. Still, in the way that deep water is still, in a way that makes you uncertain about the depth. That stillness made Bree visibly uncomfortable, and she stopped talking. "Bree," he said, "I didn't ask you." Bree went quiet. He turned back to Priya. Their eyes met and something crossed Priya's face. Quick, involuntary, like a flinch at a sound only she could hear. Then it was gone, and the controlled expression returned. "Ryder," she said, "sign the papers." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his jacket. "I'll sign when you tell me yourself. No audience, no script. When you make a decision that's actually yours, call me." He walked out. The next morning she called again. Same cold voice, same flat command. He arrived to find someone else in the apartment. Harlan Voss, sitting on the couch with his legs crossed and his expensive watch catching the light, wearing the complete comfort of a man who has decided the space belongs to him before anyone has agreed to that. Priya stood quickly when Ryder entered. She didn't look him in the eye. "Ryder, these are the divorce papers. Sign them. I'm moving forward." Ryder looked at Voss. One long, measuring look. Then he looked at Priya. "Is this your decision?" Her voice cracked just slightly before she steadied it. "Yes. You're a coffee vendor, Ryder. We don't match. We never did." Voss leaned back and smiled. The settled, expansive smile of a man watching a scene go exactly the way he scripted it. "Brother, she's made her choice. You're not on her level. Sign the papers, go back to your corner, and I'll make it worth your time." Ryder didn't respond to him. He walked to the table, picked up the papers, and read each page slowly and completely. Then he picked up a pen. Priya's breath caught. Voss sat up slightly. Ryder signed, page by page, without rushing, set the pen down. Then he walked to Priya and extended his hand. "My grandmother's ring," he said. "It's mine." She hesitated. Then she slid it off and placed it in his palm. He closed his fist around it, held it for a moment, and then looked at her with an expression that wasn't anger, wasn't contempt, wasn't grief. Something more complicated and more final than any of those things. "Priya," he said, "I want you to remember something. Everything you've built, everything you think is yours, it exists because of me. The day you find out what that means, it's going to hurt." Voss laughed out loud. Big talk from a guy with a coffee thermos. Ryder turned and looked at Voss the way you look at a door you're about to walk through and never come back to. "Harlan, the day isn't far where you'll be standing in front of me asking for something. Remember this moment when that happens." Voss laughed harder. "Sure, buddy." "Sure." Ryder left. The cold outside didn't bother him. He walked to his bike, put his grandmother's ring in his pocket, and made a call. Jade answered on the second ring. "How'd it go?" "It's done." A silence. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." He exhaled slowly. "The Holloway party, 2 nights from now. Get my clothes ready." A pause. "Which ones?" "The ones from the Scottsdale deal." Jade's voice changed. Something between recognition and quiet excitement. The tone of someone who has been waiting for a specific conversation and finally hears the first words of it. "Ryder, you're coming back. Tell everyone to be ready tomorrow night. Chicago changes." The next day, he ran his corner for the last time.
Gerald came. Dion came. The little girl who always wanted hot chocolate came, and he had it ready before she reached the cart, the way he always did.
He gave everyone a little extra that morning, stayed a little longer, laughed a little more freely, moved through the small familiar rituals of the corner with the particular attention of someone who is saying goodbye without saying it out loud. When he packed up the cart at the end of the morning, Gerald lingered, watching. "Nobody's going to bother this corner after tonight," Ryder said. Gerald frowned. "How, son?" Ryder smiled, climbed on his bike. "Trust me." That evening, Jade arrived at the room with the suit. When Ryder put it on and turned to face the mirror, she stopped mid-sentence. Whatever she had been about to say simply left her. Because this was not the man who ran the coffee cart. The posture was the same, the quiet eyes were the same, but something had shifted in the way it was all assembled. Some quality of presence that the worn jacket and the cart and the rented room had been deliberately muffling, now simply visible, undisguised.
"Ryder," Jade said, and couldn't finish. "You scared?" he asked. "A little." "Good," he said. "So are they." The Holloway Group Gala was held at the Grand Continental on Michigan Avenue. 8 o'clock, 200 people, the kind of gathering where everyone knows everyone, and the air has the particular quality of rooms where old money and fresh ambition exist in comfortable proximity. Brennan Cho, Sutton Park executives, Harlan Voss with his father Douglas Voss, a man whose name had been attached to this city's financial infrastructure for 30 years. Priya Oberfeld with her brother Colt, both of them moving through the crowd with the ease of people who have been attending events like this for as long as they can remember. They moved in their circles, they clinked glasses, they congratulated each other on things they hadn't fully earned. They made the particular noises of people who are comfortable in spaces designed to make them comfortable. Near the bar, Voss had his arm around Priya's shoulder, lowering his voice in that specific way people lower their voices when they want to appear to be sharing something private in a public room. After tonight, Oberfeld Group and Voss Group are the biggest names in the city. My father and Holloway go back 20 years. This deal is done. Priya smiled, but her eyes weren't completely present. Colt stood nearby, grinning. And that coffee guy thought he was going to be a problem. Where is he now? Priya's smile stayed in place, but she didn't answer. At the far end of the room, the host, Warren Holloway, a man whose presence in his own gala had the quality of a figure in a landscape, essential to the composition but somehow apart from it, stood with his eyes moving consistently toward the main entrance. His assistant leaned close. "He's not here yet," Warren said. "He'll come. And when he does, watch every face in this room." Then the main doors opened.
A small commotion near the entrance. A security guard stepped in front of someone. Colt looked over and snickered.
"There he is. They're going to throw him out." Voss laughed. Comfortable, expansive. "This is actually perfect. Let him get embarrassed in front of everyone." Priya turned. Ryder stood at the entrance in a charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for exactly this room. Same calm face, same quiet eyes. Not nervous, not performing, not arriving, just there, with the specific presence of someone who has never needed a room's permission to inhabit it. The security guard said, "Sir, your name isn't on the guest list." Ryder said, "Tell Warren Holloway that Ryder is here. He'll understand." The guard hesitated, crossed the room, spoke quietly to an assistant. The assistant looked up, scanned the entrance, walked briskly to Warren Holloway, leaned close. Warren turned around and looked toward the door. Then he began walking toward it himself.
And that was when the room changed. Not because of anything said, not because of any announcement, but because Warren Holloway had not walked toward anyone at one of his own events in 20 years. Every person in that room who knew Warren understood immediately that something significant was happening. And every one of them went still in the particular way of people who don't want to miss whatever is coming next.